Good afternoon, my dear listeners, and welcome back to the CSA Cafe, where we talk about controversial topics about everything, anywhere, about anyone. As always, I'm your host Ash, and today's sip is coming in hot, so grab your favorite drink, book, and get comfy. Hello, everybody! It's your host Ash again. I'm so sorry for such a delayed episode 2 because your host hasn't been feeling very well and she's been on and off with stomach troubles and everything. So I wholeheartedly apologize. That's why today's opening is in the late afternoon rather than in the late night. As you can hear from my voice, I'm still kind of recovering from whatever is going on. But I hope everybody is staying warm these days because it is very, very cold now. Fall has fallen upon us, and Halloween is coming soon this month, and so I hope everybody has gotten their pumpkin spice lattes, their sweaters, and having their winter coats on standby. Knowing we are true Canadians, snow can come before Christmas hits. Trust me on this. Anyway, I finally got part of my studio ready for recording as I got a new headset mic, so hopefully everyone now can hear me more clearer and a bit more louder so that they don't have to turn up all of their volume on their phones and hear me. I also wanted to know that I'm not that very tech savvy in terms of editing skills, and so all you're doing is staring at a black screen, and that there's nothing to watch except for subtitles, unfortunately, because I'm still trying to find out whether or not I can edit my entire logo on the video itself so that you can see my logo and read the subtitles at the same time. That's why I've been going back and forth and editing my first video and putting English sub on the title so that everybody knows that I do put subtitles for all my viewers. So even if you can't hear me, you can read what I'm saying to you. So hopefully that helps the accessibility bit a little bit more clearer. But anyways, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Strap in your seatbelts, everyone, because we're taking a time machine back in the late 1990s to the early 2000s when I was back in kindergarten and learned all about basic manners, morals, and values alike. I'm pretty sure the majority of us have heard of the saying, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all, right? Everybody's familiar with that saying. We've learned it when we were little kids. We all know what that means. Don't waste your breath saying something you'll regret later on and upset the feelings of the individuals you're speaking to. Unfortunately, for my boomer and/or also silent generation parents, and sometimes my entire family, they still say it, uncensored, unfiltered, and with no shame whatsoever. It's like they don't have any guilty conscience either way when they say it. They say it with a straight face and without remorse or hesitation. See, I also have a filter. I also have no filter. I'm so sorry. I also have no filter when I say some things, and I'm actually more daring than I was 5 to 10 years ago. But the difference between my parents and I, in terms of saying unfiltered things, is that I selectively choose what to unfilter and say, depending on the vibes I'm feeling at that moment and the situation I'm in. My philosophy for saying quote-unquote hurtful things to people is for the sake of their reputation and safety. I want them to know firsthand from me directly, rather than them finding out at a random time by themselves, and possibly hate me there afterwards because I knew prior but didn't say anything. Does that make sense? I want them to know from me directly and me telling them directly, rather than them randomly one day walking down on the street or walking down the halls from school and accidentally eavesdropping on the people that hate them, talking about them, and finding out, oh, so-and-so said something hurtful about X. And then they will come storming to me, clarifying if it was true and whether or not I've known about this for a while. And then I start feeling guilty. Because if I say yes, I can easily see that their face has fallen and all trust and friendship has been broken. Because I've known for a while, but I didn't say anything in hopes to save the heartbreak and have them be more upset. But 9 times out of 10, we think that it'll hurt them if we don't say anything, but we are more or less wrong more of the times. For me, anyway. For my experience is me not telling somebody something and then they find out afterwards and then they come talk to me about it is 100 times more hurtful and a lot more harder to repair than if we tell them before anything gets too out of hand, if that makes any sense. I was nicknamed the Tattletailer during my school days because I always told the teacher on my classmates and bullies whenever they messed with me or my friends. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? You're 10 to 11 years old, and you kept getting tormented by being laughed at for repeating grade 2 and looking and dressing like a boy. The only thing I was good at was telling on an adult, and apparently also being dubbed the teacher's pet was a bad thing back then. So yeah, the only thing I was good at was telling an adult back then what happened, in hopes that they'll diffuse the tension and relieve the conflict. Unfortunately, that is not how it went most of the times, which is very saddening. I'll tell you why I had to repeat such a quote-unquote simple and basic grade. I'll give you a hint. It's not because I didn't know my stuff or that I was a disobedient student. It's because I was at my prime for ADHD, and now autism, symptoms showing in class. There was a reason behind my chatterbox behavior and distractibility and restlessness. Looking back, the teacher back then picking on me constantly wasn't because I kept causing trouble for the entire class or even wanted to cause trouble and cause her to be so stressed, but it's because I didn't have the resources to tame my ADHD back then to be more tolerable. I didn't have the resources back then, and it was hard to recognize the signs of ADHD to begin with back in the 90s. We just didn't know that there was a thing called different bodies, different minds. Fast forward to now being at 30. I keep on learning new things and relearning behaviors till this day. I realized late that I still have the same tattletale habit from when I was a kid. It now displays itself as calling people out for their BS and running my mouth unfiltered for the sake of standing up for people who don't have a voice. This is why I'm sometimes being labeled as scary or intimidating because of my strong sense for justice. My passionate persona is what drives me despite me being scared of who I'm going up against. Having to see inequality pushes me more to make me take the initiative to stand up for folks, rather than worry about my own safety. It may sound like I'm describing myself as having a hero complex, but I assure you, I'm not. Now, my whole stance on this issue on whether or not you should talk truthfully all the time, even if it hurts the others, is nuanced, which my mother doesn't have and can't tell. Because I just stated that the difference between my mother and I choosing to be unfiltered is through intuition and selectivity. I believe it should solely depend on the situation you're in and if it is deemed safe for you to do so without you having to get emotionally or physically hurt in any way. I think of whether or not it would save my friendship with them or potentially even save their life if I tell them something. If it will make my friendship with them turn for the worst, I might still choose to tell them because I don't want them to end up finding out by themselves and come to me and hate me for it because I knew all along and didn't tell them. However, I'd like to tell them at a later time when I feel like they are in good spirits. This is how I was raised in my household. Mind reading and reading people's emotions and behaviors in general, so that I don't get in trouble by being yelled at constantly 24/7. I know this still doesn't tell you where I stand on this topic, as is the last episode, but I promise you it get better as time passes. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm still new to this podcast world and the whole process of uploading and editing videos, too, so that's why it sounds so confusing right now. I typically like to see both sides of a story and try to understand from both points of view. Most situations can be seen in various ways, and it doesn't have to be a choice between one or the other. I hope you all understand where I'm coming from when I say this. Before I go, I wanted to recommend a book for all of my listeners to read. I'm thinking of adding book recommendations at the end of my podcasts for any bookworms such as myself that are interested. So, for today's book recommendation is my number one go-to recommendation for all of my friends, even in real life, for any new readers that would like something inspirational, touching, emotional, but also quite a short read, because it is a very small book. It is a true story between a professor and a student beyond the classroom walls. It's called Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. It's based on a true story between Mitch's real-life professor that taught him everything about life and death, and what made him into the author we know of today. I hope all of you enjoy, and I hope to hear comments about if anybody has begun reading that book. I would love to hear comments about how you think of the book, what you like about it, what you didn't like about it, what you found interesting, the writing style, Mitch's writing style, their technique, anything. I'd love to discuss books with all of my listeners. Well, my dear listeners, it's time to say goodbye. I hope today's tea warmed your stomach and satisfied your appetite. As always, I'm your host Ash, and hope to see you again at the CSA Cafe.